I just offloaded the footage from my trail cameras that have been out all summer recording the wildlife that's been moving through our property. In this video, we'll see an update on the baby foxes, some of our larger mammals, as well as new arrivals, including an incredibly surprising first sighting of my most sought after species. Recently, I've been sinking a lot of my time into a new project on the wildlife homestead. I'm trying to convert this area into a wildlife food forest to try to get more fruits, nuts, and wildflowers growing to support some of the local wildlife for years to come. This area was logged about 6 years ago, so there's a ton of brush and other plants already established that I've had to clear out. And honestly, it's taken me a lot longer than I thought it would, as most projects do. But even though I'm busy, it's nice to know that the trail cameras are running 24/7 and catching most of the wildlife around. I want to start with an update on the red foxes. In the spring, they were the species that showed up the most on our cameras, and the summertime hasn't been any different. After the 5 kids left the comfort of our garage in the spring, we saw them hang out at this intersection where they'd wait for the adults to come back with food. But now that they're a bit older, they've really been exploring the land, and we've seen them popping up on more and more of our trail cameras. This is roughly around the time that they'll fully separate from the adults, usually between 6 to 8 months old. They'll still have some contact, but by late fall or early winter, when food availability becomes a factor, the young will have already left to establish their own territories. The one thing that's been tricky about watching the kids grow up is they're now starting to become almost indistinguishable from the adults, and it's getting harder and harder to track how many are still around. Even in the last trail camera update, I couldn't get a good grasp on how many of them survived. At the time, the most I saw on the cameras was 2, which isn't great, but luckily during the middle of summer, we got some more clips of the young together as a group. In this video, you can see what I believe is the mother in the front, and then 4 kits directly behind her. The father has more of a darker coat and is usually alone on the cameras gathering food for the female, and I don't see him in this group, which means at least 4 of the 5 kits have survived. Survivorship numbers for red foxes is a little all over the place, considering some live in the middle of the city and some live in the middle of nowhere. So I've seen survivorship numbers as low as 20% and some as high as 50% for red foxes around this age. But for this group, having at least 4 of the 5 kids survive means a very solid 80% survivorship, and I think that's a testament to the parenting skill of both of the adults. In the last weeks of summer, anytime a fox would trigger a camera, they'd be alone. It looks like they've slowly started to separate. I've already noticed that their coats are getting just a little bit thicker, so they're probably dispersing and preparing for the cold weather ahead. I'll be interested to see if they do stick around during the winter, but for the time being, it's just nice to see the story of the red fox kids come full circle. I mean, we've been watching them ever since they were these tiny pups in the spring, and to see them grow up over the months, gain their independence, and begin a new life of their own, I couldn't have asked for a better first year with the red foxes. I have my fingers crossed there's a new litter around next year, and maybe if we're lucky we'll see some of these young foxes visiting. But another newborn that we saw in the spring that I was hoping to have more updates on was the moose calf. When we first saw this female, she had 2 calves in early spring, but later in the season, only one of them had survived. Unfortunately, our moose sightings on the cameras have fallen off a cliff during the summer. I'm not really sure what happened, but in the spring we had around 200 videos of them, and for the entire summer we only had 20. None of which were of the female and her calf, so sadly I don't have any updates on how they're doing. We did, however, have these 2 young bull moose that have been hanging around together. They look to be about 1.5 years old, but considering how large they already are, it's crazy to think that they won't reach full size for another 3 or 4 years. We recently adopted a dog, and while taking her out for a walk, we actually saw one of the 2 young moose moving through the forest right by our road. This is beside an area that I've been turning into a new winter bird and wildlife feeding station. I started building a hide here to not only film the birds, but also to hopefully film fishers. This is a patch of woods where I've seen them the most on the cameras, and I even had 2 very brief encounters with them in person. I'll share the full update on this area later in the winter when everything is up and running. One of the things that I did in this area was set up a few salt blocks, corn piles, and apples from our trees. We have 3 trees producing apples around our house, so I've been picking some up and spreading them around the property. Deer usually don't come that close to our home, so this was a good way to get them some of these apples. One of the first ones to show up was this doe with her 2 fawns. I first saw them on the cameras in early summer, back when their spots were still visible. As their new coats start to grow in, these spots will fade after a few months. They're usually gone by early fall. After seeing the female moose losing one of her calves, I was curious to see how these two fawns would fare, especially since I was also seeing an increase in coyote activity on the trail cameras. But surprisingly, as I combed through the footage, both fawns have survived up until this point and they're both looking healthy. Seems like the mother is taking them all over the property. They've triggered some of the cameras towards the front of our lot and the cameras at the back as well, but as you would expect, they were most active around the food pile. With free food, it was inevitable that the raccoons would show up. This is a group of regulars on our property, a mom and her 3 young. And we then had one of the fishers come through to grab a snack. This area is within eyeshot of the hide I'm building, so I'm really excited to start sitting in there and seeing if I can get my first proper footage of the fishers. I also have all the materials for the fisher den boxes, so during the fall I'll be building and setting those up to monitor during the winter. Once most of the food was gone, the doe and her fawns started moving around the property more. By mid-September, the fawns had almost fully lost their spots, and it won't be long before all of these deer move out of the area. Majority of the deer will travel to the place where they yard up for the winter. This gives us the opportunity to see new deer as they're moving through, and towards the back of our lot, we had our first bucks of the year. To be honest, when I envisioned seeing the first bucks on the property, I was hoping it would be a little bit more impressive, but hey, 2 little spikes is better than nothing. We still have a decent amount of apples left, so I'm hoping to put more out to see if we can get any other bucks to visit. I will need to leave some under the tree though for the pair of gobblers that have practically been living at the front of the property. They arrived in the first week of summer and have stayed here all this time. They just circle around the house all day, going for some apples and cleaning up some seeds under our feeders. They really took a liking to the bird bathing pond I built, so you'll be seeing a lot more of them when I do an update on how that's going. Towards one of our bigger ponds, we had a new arrival during the migration. The fall bird migration has been very slow so far. It seems like it'll be nowhere near as busy as the spring migration. But one morning I looked out to see our first great blue heron standing by the water. We still have brook trout in that pond, so I set up a trail camera to see if the heron could actually catch any. Our first visitor was a curious deer. But the next morning, the heron showed up. The first few days I didn't see it catch anything besides a dragonfly. I think it was searching for the perfect hunting spot and dialing in a strategy, because over the next 2 days it caught its first and second trout. It's possible it caught even more fish that the camera didn't pick up. Right now there seems to be about a handful of trout left and the heron has moved on. We'll wait to see if any others show up during the tail end of migration, but it's good to know that herons do visit. We'll have to factor that into whatever we decide to do with the pond in the future. Since the migration was slow, I started to focus a lot of my time on projects before the snow arrives. I mentioned before that I've been working on a wildlife food forest. One of the things that I had to do was clear out some of the trees on the perimeter of this area to let in more sunlight so our trees and shrubs can grow and produce more fruit. So you'll see a bit of a transition here as the section opens up. Because I was causing a bit of a disturbance, I had thought that we wouldn't get much action on the trail cameras around here. But after the first day of work, I nearly lost it when I saw my holy grail species walk by this camera. The lynx. I swear I watched this video about a couple dozen times on this tiny screen just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating and I was actually seeing a lynx. I don't know where it came from or where it went. This was the only camera that it triggered. And even though this was only one short clip and there's not a whole lot of information we can gather from it, this confirms that they're actually around and it gives me hope that I can see one of my favorite animals roaming around the wildlife homestead sometime in the near future.